Depleted uranium ammunition. Sounds ominous, doesn't it? Well, it is. Is it possible that the use of this kind of ammunition by the American government has any real justification? Can depleted uranium in any way, shape, or form be safe to use as a device of war? Remember, it has the word uranium in its description, and uranium is radioactive. Therefore, my question is, do I have the right to question the integrity of a government that is so freely willing to use a weapon that can cause so much devastation? Depleted uranium is a byproduct of producing radioactive enriched uranium, which is used in making nuclear fuel and nuclear weapons. For years, depleted uranium had no function and was stored in large amounts in special radioactive protected containers. Uranium is one of the heavy metals. This includes depleted uranium. It is more than 1.5 times as hard as lead. The Pentagon was in the market for an innovative weapon of war. Depleted uranium was discovered to have a use as ammunition, missiles, bombs, shells, and bullets. Because it is very dense, it can penetrate and destroy almost anything. When a depleted uranium shell hits a tank, it pierces through the tank, exploding and burning up everything inside. The government had their almost perfect weapon. At the same time, there was now a feasible use for depleted uranium instead of the costly storage expenditures. This seemed to be a win-win situation, except for one key problem. When depleted uranium explodes and burns, it lets off radioactive and chemically toxic gases that leave a residue in and around the target area. Now, our government would like for us, the American people, to believe that the amount of radioactive material and chemically toxic gases in depleted uranium is very low. Depleted uranium has the same properties as natural uranium, except it is 40% less radioactive. In one study done by the Department of Defense in 1990, tests were done under simulated battlefield situations. The result of these tests indicated that the risk in using depleted uranium were minimal, especially if military personnel avoided the vehicles in contaminated areas. According to the Department of Defense, there are not any real threats to humans or the environment caused from the exposure to depleted uranium residue. Now, I regard the Department of Defense's statement that depleted uranium is not harmful, but try to avoid any contact with destroyed vehicles and target areas as a contradiction in terms. Maybe they were just trying to be cautious, just in case health or environmental issues arose. Then they could say, we told you to avoid these areas, but with the immense amount of evidence I've seen to the contrary, I simply don't believe this is the case. Dr. Azif Durakovic, once a colonel in the U.S. Army, founded the Uranium Medical Research Center. In research done over the last 10 years by Dr. Durakovic, he has found case after case of our Gulf War veterans having been contaminated by depleted uranium. One of the field studies Dr. Durakovic performed found that the soil, air, and water samples from contaminated target areas in Iraq contained more than hundreds to thousands the amount of normal radiation. The way a person becomes contaminated by depleted uranium is either through skin contact, inhalation of the dust, or swallowed in food or water. Depleted uranium can affect a person in 3 ways: by chemical poison, radioactive poison, and the particulate effect. The particulate effect is caused from minute particles entering into a person's body that are 0.1 microns or smaller. Some of the residual effects that have been documented by Dr. Durakovic from depleted uranium exposure are respiratory problems, headaches, dizziness, gastrointestinal illnesses, cancers, chronic fatigue syndrome, lung and kidney damage, and severe skin conditions. Somehow, I perceive all these physical ailments to be a little more than low-risk problems from exposure to depleted uranium residue, as the government would like us to think. What I consider the worst atrocity from depleted uranium use is the birth defects in babies from parents who were contaminated and leukemia in the children of Iraq. Birth defects are not just seen in babies in Iraq, but also to babies born to American British Gulf War veterans. Dr. Sigwart Horst Gunter has been working in Iraq for over 40 years. A few years after the first Gulf War, he noticed an extremely high occurrence of birth defects in the babies being born to Iraqi military personnel. Many were born with no facial features, one eye, internal organs on the outside of their bodies, grossly deformed heads, no arms or legs, and other abnormalities. He also noticed an exceedingly great degree of leukemia in the children from the war-torn areas of Iraq. Dr. Gunter was immensely curious as to the reason for this phenomenon. Due to his research, he found that the abnormalities that were showing up were closely related to the same problems that were exhibited after the Chernobyl disaster in the Ukraine. Dr. Gunter and a team of scientists did an in-depth study of the war zones in Iraq. The results of these studies showed a highly toxic concentration of radiation in all of these areas, which would be harmful to anyone who goes near them. He and his team concluded that the use of depleted uranium ammunition was the cause for the increase in birth defects and leukemia in the children of Iraq. Dr. Gunter's team of scientists also did research on some of the British war veterans that were having problems with cancer, respiratory illnesses, and babies with birth defects. His results came out much the same as the testing done in Iraq. The veterans showed high levels of radiations in their body, which in turn was the cause of their illnesses, cancers, and birth defects. Again, he concluded that depleted uranium residue was the culprit. There have been research studies done by many other reputable scientists and organizations on the harmful effects of depleted uranium ammunition. Some of these are Dr. Doug Roque, former director of the Army's Depleted Uranium Project, Lauren Moret, internationally recognized expert on radiation, Dr. Al Ali, director of Oncology Center in Basra, Iraq, Dr. Keith Baverstock, the World Health Organization's chief expert on radiation. All these people have come up with basically the same conclusions. Depleted uranium ammunition is harmful to humans in many devastating ways. It should be banned as a weapon of war because it is so destructive. To this day, the United States government does not acknowledge to any wrongdoing in the use of depleted uranium ammunition. Our Gulf War veterans are suffering from all sorts of illnesses and cancers, the cause seeming to be depleted uranium. However, the government is not stepping up to their responsibility to take care of them. These are men and women who have put their lives on the line to protect us and our country. The very least our government should do is to assume their responsibility for the veterans. However, it took the government forever to admit to Agent Orange in Vietnam, so why should they admit to depleted uranium radiation? As long as our government can convince citizens that the experts are just trying to cause disharmony, then they will not take it upon themselves to be responsible for the consequences of depleted uranium. Again, I wonder, where is the integrity of our government? As the saying goes, all's fair in love and war. But is it?